Hey everyone, welcome to a new segment here on the KE Report, talking stocks with Quinton Hennigh. I'm going to be bringing Quinton Hennigh on every month or so to dive more into exploration stocks. I know we talk a lot about broad markets and economic data, but we do get so many questions on individual companies, and we bring a lot of companies on for company updates, but it's always handy chatting with some of the industry insiders here. Quinton is a geologist and investor. I think you all know Quinton very well. But I reached out to Quinton and said, hey, Quinton, let's get you on the show more regularly to talk individual stocks, your thoughts on these stocks. Quinton agreed. So this is our very first segment. It's going to be a little bit longer in nature simply because I want to get to a couple general jurisdictions that have some action in them. And in future calls, we'll take the companies that you want us to look into. So please email me the companies that you want us to look at. We'll do some research on them and address those companies in our future interviews. My email address, fleck@kereport.com. I'll also post it within this posting on our website and podcast. Quinton, let's start off talking more the broad market for exploration companies. As much as we have seen this uptick in the precious metals prices, especially gold breaking out, we don't have an environment where all these exploration companies are cashed up with big work programs. If anything, we've seen smaller work programs being announced and a number of companies waiting to still even announce work programs for this year, being very market dependent. What are you seeing in terms of the broad environment for exploration companies?
Yeah, look, the metal price increase here lately has been welcome, certainly across the entire industry. You're starting to see some mining companies that, we're seeing increased pressure from costs, kind of pinch margins and profits and such. I think with the increasing metal price, we should see a resumption in more of we'll call it a bull mentality in the space. I don't think we're quite there yet. Unfortunately, we're not seeing generalist money come, roaring back into this space at this point. I think we're going to have to wait a little while, but that's not uncommon in the mining space. I think back to periods like 2001, 2, and 3, the gold price was rising, and pretty consistently actually through that time period. But it took a while, probably 2 or 3 years before the money followed. I don't think it's going to take quite that long to see money come back into this space, but I do think we have to be patient and wait. And like always, the money usually trickles down from the top. In other words, investors, especially generalist investors who start to recognize an opportunity to invest in mining and commodities and such, they start with the ETFs and then the big mining companies and stuff like that, and then they work their way down the food chain. And usually, junior mining companies are the last ones, to rise with the tide. But we will see that happen. I guess if there's anything I would say, right now is a great time for investors, especially smart investors, to get positioned in junior companies that haven't seen any significant lift here yet. I think that this is the time you do things. I can remember myself investing way back in the early 2000s, and I jumped into stories that, look, at this point they're so distant, such distant memories. I don't think anybody had recognized them, but like Midway Gold had an exciting gold discovery in Nevada, and Victoria Gold was drilling around the Cortez area. They were hitting stuff. I jumped in stocks, and they were pennies at the time. And man, over the course of the 2 or 3 years that I held them, say between 2001, 2, and 3, they did well. By the end of it, I made some pretty serious money. So, it's a good time if you're smart to get into this space and learn as much as you can about investing in the mining space, and then hold on. This is a buy and hold type environment. I would like to see money start coming back into the space. There's a lot of junior companies out there that are very hungry for financing right now. And I think one of the phenomena I see, I guess, as a product of this starvation that we've seen in the sector for a long time, there's going to be many companies, come come to the market, every time there's a bit of an uplift, a bit of an uptick in sentiment, you're going to see a lot of junior companies, put out news releases. Hey, we're trying to raise, 300,000 here and 500,000 there, and trying to get some cash back in the bank. It's like a land of zombies in some respects. But we're going to have to get through that period. I guess if there's anything, if you do have money, it's a good time to invest because this is about as cheap as it gets.
Yeah, we have seen a lot of companies even hold back on announcing work plans so far just because they don't have the budget and they don't know what the market looks like. But look, we're going to be focusing on companies that have cash and have discoveries. So let's start off jurisdiction-wise in the Yukon, in the Tombstone Gold Belt. You've talked to a lot of these companies. You've talked about a lot of these companies. I featured a number of them on the show. We can talk Snowline. We can talk Banyan that just came out with a 7 million ounce resource. Rackla or Sitka. Those are a bit earlier stage, but Sitka does have a resource of over 1 million ounces as well. Quinton, what are you focused on in the Tombstone Gold Belt with any of these companies?
Yeah, Corey, look, I guess the first thing I would say, and I've got to say this because I am an investor and I also work with Crescat Capital and we invest in a lot of these junior companies. I would just, bring that to everyone's attention that whatever I say, might somewhat biased given that I am an investor or Crescat's an investor. So, you got to do your own due diligence and things like that. But look, I am a big fan of the Yukon. Okay, I'm a super big fan of the idea that we need a new gold belt, a new gold province or district upon which we can kind of, set the table for this next gold cycle. And I think the Yukon is it. Okay, there's a large number of these reduced intrusions spanning the Tintina Belt. Many of them are in the Yukon, not all of them. There's actually some examples over into Alaska. But I really see these as being, the potential candidates that can generate tier one assets, tier one being assets that can produce, hundreds of thousands of ounces of gold per year on a sustainable basis for a decade or decades of mine life. And that's what we have to see in the gold mining space. There's so many big companies now, so many big and intermediate gold mining companies that, are just seeing this continual depletion of resources in their portfolio and really depletion of high quality, high margin mines that we got to see, a rejuvenation in the kind of the base, that we have for the mines that can generate profits and build, rebuild these gold mining companies into profitable companies once more. Now, the Yukon is, it is remote. Some places are remote, and people tend to be critical of that. But the way I look at it is this, a lot of the gold belts started out this way. Many gold belts started out this way. And, one of the litmus tests I have for investing in the gold space is, can you build mines there? And look, the Yukon actually has been a place where mines get built. Okay, you look at the Eagle deposit, Victoria Gold's Eagle deposit. That's an example of a large-scale mine that's been built in recent times. Okay, so yeah, I do think that all of these companies you mentioned there, if they make discovery, have a pretty good chance of advancing their projects into production. All right, so Snowline obviously it is remote, but it's a very high-grade reduced intrusive deposit. Easily justifies the capital that's going to be needed to build a road in there, as well as build the project. I think with what's taking shape right now, low bar 10 million ounces, but it could be much bigger. It could be 15, in my view. I do think that it's one of the best gold deposits I've ever seen because it's just so homogeneous. It is so well behaved that basically when you start mining that deposit, you're going to be an ore from day one. And quite frankly, pretty good ore. There's a very large, high-grade core to it that's readily accessible right at surface. I think it's going to make a fantastic mine. But then you have Banyan. Banyan has been drilling and advancing their project, which is not all that far from Victoria, bear in mind, okay? It's not far away in a very similar tenor, very similar style of mineralization. Then you have other companies like Rackla, much earlier stage, but they have multiple reduced intrusive targets. You've got Onyx Gold, again, several reduced and intrusive targets. You have Sitka. Sitka is one that I am very intrigued with. It's a bit southwest, or the target, the RC project is the main target, and that's southwest of the Eagle area, so southwest of Victoria, at least they're mine. But Sitka is drilling right now and has demonstrated they might have a higher grade component to the system at depth. Very anxious to see what happens there. And then you can extend the terrain into Alaska. I think even tectonic I would throw into the overall Tentina story, just because it is a reduced intrusive style system, albeit in western Alaska. And they had some strong results late last year. So these are the deposits we need to see to catalyze the new gold cycle and the rebirth of the gold mining industry.
So, Quinton, let's talk about some of these companies and dive a little bit more in depth. Let's start with Snowline because that's just garnered so much attention, and so much attention has been at that valley target that they continuously hit some long intercepts of pretty good grade. What about some of these other targets that Snowline has tested and has on the docket to be tested, I believe, this year and through the next couple of years?
Look, Snowline has many reduced intrusive targets across their property. I can't think of a company, quite frankly, in the entire gold space that has a better portfolio of gold assets than Snowline. It's remarkable. Look, these reduced intrusive systems, they're relatively exploration friendly, okay, in that they generate a big, robust anomaly in terms of stream sediment anomalism and stuff. You can, in other words, you can find them fairly easily. Like you can take stream sediment samples and kind of hone in on where one of these systems might be. And clearly, Snowline has many targets. Now, what does that mean? Well, the Valley deposit is their flagship by all means, okay? But, these other ones like this Aurelius and then this Cujo target, and, even other ones that are nearby Valley, these are very robust as well. In fact, they look a heck of a lot like what Valley looked like before it was drilled. Okay, so Aurelius, this target they talked about recently, I think it was maybe 3-4 weeks ago, they could go in there and end up finding a brand new Valley type discovery here. Clearly a reduced intrusive type system, albeit it's more concealed. It's not been more, fully eroded, like exposed. But that's not a bad thing. They could get in there and start drilling and actually find an entirely preserved system. So, ultimately, what do I think might happen? Well, I think Snowline is likely going to be a takeover target. That's almost a given. But it's going to be for Valley. But, what does that mean? Well, the company could probably, if they had to, spin out a lot of these other assets, take them with, and then the investors who are behind Snowline get another punt at another kick at the can. So it's a really great outcome.
Do you think the company would benefit by putting a resource on Valley and all the drilling that's done there? Or should they still just focus on exploration at Valley and at these other targets?
I have a bit mixed view. Look, sometimes it sounds like I'm talking out both sides of my mouth, but I do think, let's back up. Why do we explore? We want to find mines, okay? First and foremost, you want to find mines. So I take a little bit different view about how we should approach drilling things. Okay, I don't think it should be just to drill to add ounces for a resource. Okay, for a 43-101 resource. That's not the ultimate product. We want to build a mine. Now, in the case of Valley, they have done a great job of testing the system, but I do see some open areas that, in my view, will be part of a mine. Okay, because of that, I would say I'd like to see them have one more season here where they drill, especially in the northeast flank, or kind of tucked up underneath the northeast side of the deposit, down plunge to the east and southeast. I think it's an open area, and even along the fringes on the west side still, I think there's some open areas. Now I say that because at the end of the day, if they drill up those areas, and I think about things in terms of like an open pit in my head, and I look at the computer model and I think, okay, if they drill off those, then they're going to have this. If the drilling is successful, in other words, if those volumes of space do indeed hold mineralization, that's going to be very important for the mine. The ultimate mine is going to be put in there, and therefore it's going to be important to do an economic study after that drilling's done. Okay, so what it means, I think they need to just fill in the blanks around a few parts of the system, and I think then they'll be in a good position to announce a resource. I wouldn't do it quite yet. I'd wait one more season, or at least maybe half a season, to get those holes in. Now, other deposits, where people just drill and drill and drill for the sake of drilling, no, I wouldn't want to see that. I don't think they're going to do that. I think they're pretty pragmatic at Snowline, and they'll have it drilled off probably by mid-season here.
All right, let's also talk Banyan Gold too, because that company just updated their resource, 7 million ounces. We don't have their exploration plans for this year, but in your eyes, what moves a company forward that already has such a large resource like Banyan?
Well, look, I talked to Tara recently, and in their presentation and with what she told me, they do see good potential for kind of culling out a high grade component to the system, and I think that's important. Okay, I think there's a lot of from what I can see, there's a lot of one 0.8 to 1 gram type material that could really help the economics there. I don't think they need to drill to add size to it. I think if anything right now, they probably need to better understand some of the higher grade areas. Okay. And I think that will be the best, that will give them the best result once they take things through a full economic study, having that high grade component. Because, at Fort Knox, for example, way back in the late 1980s, early 1990s, when that was being drilled up in advance, they did have a core. I remember being at Fort Knox the week it opened. I actually went on a site visit there. They had a core that was running about 0.9 to 1 gram. And that ended up being a very, very important part of that deposit, because it paid back a lot of the capital costs to develop it. And then, after that, it just became a cash cow for many, many, many years. So I think Banyan's at a certain point where they need to kind of fully evaluate the higher grade part of their system, especially the shallower parts of it, and then see if they can put a mine plan together around it.
All right, let's switch focus then into Finland. A lot more news has come out of Finland as Eagle has, in a way, took a renewed interest in Finland. They already run a major mine in Finland, but they've been a bit more active on the investment front. A number of companies we can talk about: FireFox Gold, Aurion Resources, Rupert Resources, which has really been a leader in the country, at least recently, over the last few years in terms of exploration. What do you think about the whole Finland play?
It's a place where I think Agnico and maybe B2 in particular were kind of setting up some battle lines, but they've now kind of reached an armistice, and the dynamics have changed. Okay, I think if you wind back the clock maybe a year ago, Agnico was kind of scratching their chin trying to figure out if they were fully committed to the Lapland, the central Lapland, that we're talking about here in Finland. And, even Kittilä, I think there was a sense that maybe it had seen its better years, and that maybe it was time to kind of move on. But then there was something happened late last year. I don't know exactly what, but, all of a sudden you saw Agnico just to do a 180. They became highly interested in other companies and projects in the central Lapland, and started being very aggressive about approaching those companies. So, FireFox Gold, for example, struck a deal. Not only did they get a placement, but they've got an earn-in now with Agnico on a very large block of ground. So Agnico seems to now be recommitting to the belt. I think that's very important. You're also seeing B2 kind of pull away a bit. They've decided to exit the joint venture they have with Aurion, and Rupert is taking that position, which is really, really interesting. Okay, so that's a dynamic. I can't think of a junior company taking the position of a major company like that before, but it is telling that B2 is thinking more and more about their strategy. I think they're thinking, moving back to Canada is a better use of their money. All right, so they're, from what I hear, they're spending a lot on Goose Lake and such, and they're going to commit to developing mines in Canada. Maybe that has an impact over in the Yukon too. Who knows? Maybe B2 decides to become more aggressive there. But anyway, in the Lapland, it seems that B2 is pulling away. But then that leaves a situation where you have Agnico and then Rupert, which is a production story, a likely target for Agnico. Okay, so that's very interesting. Is anybody else going to stick their hand up and jump in there? I'd be surprised, but you never know. Maybe there's competition for Rupert. In the meantime, Rupert taking on this joint venture, heck, that's really darned interesting. It's also interesting because, as many people know, if you dig into the details, Aurion has some critical ground just to the south or southwest of the Rupert's Ikari deposit that, quite frankly, is necessary ground for the layback of the pit. Okay, so there's going to have to be a reconciliation between those two companies to move Ikari forward, in my view. So maybe this is part of that. I don't know, but lots of dynamics there. I think it's a good place to invest now because I can see the like that logjam that we were faced there for a long time with all these companies kind of locked in these positions that weren't holistic, I guess is the best way to put it, are now able to consolidate and grow and stuff. And I think you're going to see the whole place consolidate into one camp. And I wouldn't be surprised if Agnico was the owner of that camp.
Okay, so consolidation in that central Lapland area. Any drill programs that you're watching this year most closely for exploration upside then at any of these companies?
Aurion always has interesting news coming out from the joint venture ground. How it goes forward with Rupert, I don't know. Like if they're going to be as aggressive as B2 was, but I do think that belt, that joint venture ground, is very prospective for more Ikari type deposits. So I'm watching that pretty closely. I'm also very keen to see what Agnico turns up on this. I believe I pronounce it right, the Coho property that they have with FireFox Gold. I'm very interested to see where that lands. Geologically, there's a lot of indications that there's Kittila type geology, Kittila and Ikari type, big scale gold targets across that property. So that's another one we must watch very closely.
All right, let's move to another part of the world that I think could also use some more consolidation, that being the Golden Triangle. Boy, oh boy, we have a lot of companies still exploring up in that area, but a lot of the companies have cut back a lot on their work programs right now. We'll get into some of the individual companies, but what in the Golden Triangle, first and foremost, has your attention?
Yeah, look, consolidation is going to have to occur. I think that's a given. There's a lot of companies. First of all, geographically, it's a very kind of compartmentalized terrain. You got these divides, geographic divides between areas that don't allow for a certain amount of consolidation to happen. Like you can't go from let's say Kitsault up to Stewart because there's a big high country with glacial fields and stuff in between them. So you have to either work on the Kitsault side or the Stewart side, and there's not a lot in between. But in these little compartments, if you think of it like compartments, I think there's wonderful opportunity to see consolidation. Okay, now with this acquisition of Newcrest by Newmont, I think that's going to change the dynamics. I have listened to like Tom Palmer speak recently about their view. I do think you're going to see Newmont continue to be active in the Golden Triangle. Now that said, I think they're going to be more focused on copper gold. Okay, just that's my gut listening to everything that they're saying. So it might not mean that the more gold pure companies or explorers that are out there are going to be front and center for Newmont. I don't know. It's hard to say, but I do see. Okay, let's pick apart the compartments. Okay, around Stewart, you've got Ascot. They are trying to get back into production. It's been a slog. It's been up and down and sideways for years now. But if they can pull this off, that's a great area for consolidation right there. I can think of 5 or 6 companies that have very strong land positions with very high grade mineralization, albeit at an early stage, like Scotty and stuff like this, that are in that region. That if you put it all together and have that one production center around the Ascot operation, you could potentially sustain a 150 or 200,000 ounce per year production for a mid-tier gold company. That would be great. That would be fantastic. I think it's doable. Okay, so there's one area that I keep my eye on. The other one is down by Kitsault. You've got Dolly Varden, you've got Goliath, you've got a few other companies that really could all benefit from a centralized processing scheme. I think the old mill site at Kitsault. They've talked about when I say the companies have a kind of a collaborative effort to look at that old mill site as a potential site for central processing for several operations. That could be a very attractive story too for a mid-tier gold or silver producer too. Don't forget Hecla's invested in Dolly Varden, for example. So I could see where somebody could come in and start bolting a few things together and come up with a really attractive operation that generates maybe 150, 200, 250,000 ounces of gold equivalent per year, probably a lot of silver in that as well. And then if you go elsewhere, in the Golden Triangle, I do think that there's some individual porphyry targets that are scattered around that, we're going to see some new exciting discoveries. I mean, obviously you got Tudor and you got KSM, Seabridge, but you're going to see some new ones. Okay, I'm watching Kingfisher. I think Kingfisher, look, Dustin and his team are sharp people, and they have a really exciting land package that they've acquired. It's over towards the eastern side of the Golden Triangle, but that one could, just looking at the early exploration results like they got last year, but the historic results on that property looks like it's very ripe for some more discovery. So yeah, lots going on. Money is the key. Are these companies going to have the money to keep drilling this year? Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah, that's really what it comes down to, isn't it? They need the money to drill because, well, that's what moves the needle. Let's dive a little bit more into Dolly Varden because that has been on a lot of people's radar with the land that they have started to acquire and start to consolidate the area. And now they're dealing in a couple different metals as well when it comes to exploration. What do you want to see Dolly Varden do in terms of workflow that you think could focus the market and move the stock?
Well, look, Dolly Varden has a number of very high quality, high grade assets or targets or deposits, I should say. The historic mine in that area obviously is first and foremost, but they also have the Homestake Ridge, and quite frankly, they're seeing high grades pop up there. So, it's kind of Ascot level type stuff. Okay, now there tends to be a silver component anywhere in that camp to any mineralization that's been found. And there's kind of this, weird hybrid geologic picture where you have VMS deposits, so early geologic formation, when the rocks were laid down, all the way through later stage mineralization, which is largely, associated with other processes, even orogenic processes or intrusive processes. Okay, but it all of the forms of mineralization there seem to be metallurgically compatible. Okay, so that's a good deal. In other words, you could probably process all of them, from what I can see, in a central processing facility. And as they've grown their project base, through acquisition, like a Homestake Ridge, for example, I think that's a very additive process. Hopefully, they continue to grow and add things. Ultimately, maybe other things get combined as well. I mean, at some point, it would make a lot of sense, like I said, for Goliath and Dolly Varden, all of their ores to be processed through a central processing facility of some sort. Okay, so how that happens, don't quite know yet, but I do see a lot more room for consolidation.
Now, final one being Goliath Resources. We've chatted with Roger a number of times to get an update on Goliath. They've been making some new discoveries as well, which I know they're going to follow up on, plus some new areas that are now exposed due to glaciers receding. What sort of exploration are you expecting from this company? What do you want to see?
Yeah, so I see Goliath is having basically the same continuum of deposits that Dolly Varden does in many ways. I mean, basically, it's the same geologic terrain. Okay, so they're finding VMS style mineralization, exposed as the ice recedes up in the ice fields. Definitely, I can't think of all the names of the targets that they have there, but there was a recent announcement up in the northern part of the ice fields that sounds like a VMS target. But then they also have these, intrusive related gold veins or gold systems that are probably more like Homestake Ridge that are gold, silver, maybe a bit of base metal, and big. Okay, when you talk about Goliath, they are at an earlier stage than Dolly Varden in many respects. Okay, they've drilled Sherbet quite a bit at this point, and they're starting to get a handle about the mineralized structures and what they probably have there. But they're finding new high grade areas still, which is really encouraging. I one of the measures I have for a company is, and as their exploration unfolds, is are they generating better and better data, better indications as time goes on? And Goliath is certainly in that category. They're seeing high grade discoveries of veins below the Sherbet structure, in that same vicinity, kind of to the south of Sherbet. All right, so but they're probably part of the same system. That's really encouraging. But then they're also seeing new high grade areas pop up, kind of in the say 5 to 10 kilometer range around Sherbet, but then also way up in the ice fields to the north. So lots and lots of potential there. Between Goliath and Dolly Varden, you have what is going to be a fantastic resource base for a long-lived mining operation. Probably a collective centralized processing, but long-lived mining operation, long-lived camp in that area.
All right, Quinton, thank you so much for doing this. I'm excited to keep this series going with you where we talk stocks again around every month. Please, everyone, send me the companies that you want me to discuss with Quinton. We'll do a little bit more research on them, and we'll get Quinton's thought on the exploration potential. That's really what we want to focus on, is exploration style stocks, and preferably ones with work programs and ones that have money, because if you don't have money in this market or in any market, you're not going to be able to drill. Quinton, it's a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you very much for your time. I look forward to chatting with you next month.
Thanks, Corey.